Gym, in between the gym and the school, they built a new lunchroom. And Grams was very happy because she designed it. She had everything put where she wanted in that kitchen. Right beside her is Omi Sweet. Omi Sweet was hired a few years later after Bessie Dieter, and Omi is the grandmother of Dr. Winrich, Rose Winrich. And Omi saved Rose's life at the tornado at Greentown by laying over the top of Rose Winrich when she was a little girl in '65, and Omi lost her life. Omi was the last head cook at Somerset High School. Now Somerset, that school became an elementary school. To the right of her was Garst, Hazel Garst. Hazel Garst lived in Old Somerset. A lot of Garsts lived in Old Somerset. And even if you go back to that original plot map, Garst was written on a lot of them 1943 plot map. Okay, TJ. This picture was taken in early on, of course. This was the early post office. And who did I say that was? I can't even read that anymore.
I know his last name is Starbuck.
Starbuck. He was the postmaster at that time when that picture was taken. This picture down here was the same post office. This was at the end of Somerset, was Bob Dirk's grocery store. This was the Masonic Lodge at the top, and at the bottom was the hardware store. Hadn't always been a hardware store, but it was for many years. And there's people in here that was involved with that hardware store. Shelby's dad was one of them. It was really one of the first guys in the hardware. Okay, TJ. This is another page out of the book. This one, a lot of you probably haven't seen. Somebody get their phone.
It's me.
Okay. This picture here was at the old steel bridge, the original bridge at Somerset. The one down below, a lot of you probably have never seen. Independent Order of Oddfellows. That was their lodge in Old Somerset. It burnt down, and I don't know what year. I haven't been able to find out. Nobody is still alive that's seen it burn down. So I think it might have been in the 20s or 30s. And it was right beside the post office across the alley. And in that picture, there are telegraph poles. So it happened after the telegraph was going. I know that. But I don't know the date on when that building finally burnt up. That property was all part of the Molesbury property on the original plats. And that's connected to Shelby's family again. They were very prominent in Somerset. Also operated and ran the drugstore in Somerset. Okay, TJ, this is just a picture of the river. This was the old bridge, 1948, steel bridge. They wouldn't let hardly anything drive across it that had any weight on it, or you'd have to get out and walk across. And it had wood planks, and it had a limited height. That was a big problem. And in 48, they decided to tear it down and build a new one. 49, they dedicated the new concrete bridge. It was wide enough to have two cars pass each other, even the big cars back then. And improved the berms on each end. Of course, they had to put in new piers. You can see there was a single pier in the river on the Mississinewa under the steel bridge. They put two in the new one on the concrete bridge. And they had a big dedication. Now everybody turned out. I think from Somerset was on that bridge. Okay, TJ. These pictures here are for me. This was Oaken Grocery Store, which my dad and mom ended up owning in 1958. And behind it, at the far end on the left, you can see the concrete end. That was the Snyder locker plant that was attached to the back of the Oaken Grocery Store. That's where I was a week old. My dad also drove oil truck for Farmer Co-op, and they did buy a used 57 Chevy that I ended up driving when I first got my driver's license. And this Oaken Grocery was there for almost ever since the beginning of Somerset. Was bought, I think, by an Ogan originally, and they built the store there. And I think there was 3 generations of Ogans. John Ogan still lives here in Somerset, or here in Wabash, and it was his mom and dad, Paul and Kate Ogan. And Dad, my mom and dad, Fred and Betty Snyder, went into partnership with them after Dad come home from World War II. Dad was in the Navy. He was stationed at Pearl Harbor when it was attacked. Fortunately, his ship was not hit. That's why I'm here. The store next to it was not owned by Mom and Dad, but they leased it, and that was the Somerset Cafe. They owned it from late 59 to 63 when they closed it. So they owned this property, they leased that property. These buildings were both connected. These pictures were actually taken by the contractor for the Army Corps of Engineers that bought these buildings about 2 years later. These pictures, I think, were taken in 62, yeah. And you can see in this picture where I spent a lot of time in my junior high years. I spent a lot of time at that restaurant. I think I did about everything. I did the grill, I did the sweeping the floors. My mom even hired Shelby for a while. And I don't know, probably somebody else in here. She was all the time hiring somebody to help in the restaurant. We were pretty busy. Okay. This is a picture of my mom and dad when they were married in 1944. Dad was still in the Navy. He come home on leave. He graduated from Somerset in 1940. I needed to tell you that first. He was very proud of being a Somerset alumni. He played basketball on the varsity team his sophomore, junior, and senior years. And he was very proud of that, even though he had to play in that little bitty dinky gym in the basement. They called it the Cracker Box Gym. I think the Cracker Box Gym was, the length was about the width of most basketball floors now. It had a very big double line in it. Mom was from Kokomo. They met at Riverside Resort. Riverside Resort was my grandmother, Vernie. She married John Nee, and that was on John Nee's property. There was about 250 acres there on that farm. And at the back of it was the Mississinewa River, and the resort was put in back there. There was a lot of baptisms in that river there. Probably wasn't very clean, but that's what they did. And when he come home on leave in 44 after he'd spent time after Pearl Harbor, he wasn't in very good shape. physically and mentally. He was on a little destroyer in the Aleutian Islands chasing Japanese submarines for a year and 6 months and never got off. They didn't get their supply ships to him. He lost his teeth. He was skin and bones when they got him off of there. And when they took him off in Seattle, they took him all to a mental hospital and told them they probably wouldn't get out. Because they'd been on board ship. They couldn't walk, of course, after being sea legs for a year and a half. They had to either wheelchair them or take them on a gurney or something. This is the store, the Oaken Grocery, and then behind, this is where they were tearing it down for the Corps of Engineer contractor was taking the buildings down in Somerset. Mom had just graduated, but they were 5 years apart in age, but they knew each other before Dad went to in the Navy in 40. They knew who each other was. Dad said she was just a little girl in junior high when he left.